Welcome back to Screen Sleuths. I'm your host, Chris, and we're here to deep dive into Dark Matter Episode 4. In this video, we'll explain in more detail how the box and the corridor work, and I'll give my thoughts on where I think the story may go. But before we pile into the box and take this journey together, we want to remind everyone that this series is based on a book that some may have not read yet, including me and Rob. So for those who have, we ask that you avoid spoilers in the comment section, even to just confirm or deny any of the theories or ideas mentioned. This way we can all be surprised each week as the story progresses. Now, with that PSA out of the way, let's jump into the multiverse. So what are the rules of this game? Because the show has invoked the many worlds theory by Hugh Everett, talked about Schrodinger's famous thought experiment, which then introduced the concept of superposition, but they played with the concept a little bit, so let me explain. In Schrodinger's experiment, the cat is in a state of superposition because until we open the box, both dead and alive are viable outcomes. But once we open the box, the cat is observed and therefore no longer exists in a state of superposition. Now let's say that the cat was alive when we opened the box. The many worlds theory would say that at the moment the box was opened, a branch reality was created where the cat was dead when we opened the box, both realities being equally real. However, based on that logic, why don't we see a dead or alive version of the pilots when the box is opened? Well, it's because the box was designed for transport. When the pilot goes into a state of superposition, they are existing in another dimension, a fourth dimension, and since we are three-dimensional beings, we can only see in height, length, and width. In a fourth dimension, we would move through space-time, according to Einstein, in a very different way. Our perception of reality would be vastly different than what it is now. This is why the show including a tesseract and a dodecahedron is important, because both are representative of a fourth dimension, which makes it an interesting symbolic choice for an urn. But what about the corridor? Is it real? Are they physically there? Are Layton, Jason, and Amanda all in the same one? The corridor is a cross-section of realities, a quantum train station, and yes, they physically are in another dimension, but like the show explained, what they see is just a perception of the mind. Same as how a two-dimensional being would see the world differently. For example, in a 2D reality, you may be able to walk right over a lake because you wouldn't be able to perceive height or depth. To you, it would just be a flat circle because you don't see the third dimension. And no, Layton and Jason and Amanda are not in the same corridor. While the corridor is a physical place within the show, it operates under unique quantum rules that differ from conventional understandings of how physical spaces work. The corridor and the box work together. It's a unique experience to each pilot who enters it. But since Amanda and Jason entered the box together, the multiverse they experience is a combination of both their minds. On the other hand, Layton, who entered the box alone, experiences a different version of the corridor. So yes, while they are in a corridor, they're not in the same one. Okay, hopefully you're still with me on this journey, and if you are, I must assume it's because you enjoy the sciencey part of the show just as much as I do. So now seems like a good time to talk about why the box can manifest in a reality that does not have a box of its own. To answer this, you need to remember that when you enter the box in reality A and travel to reality B, you're building a quantum bridge between realities. For example, imagine you are on Island A and you wanted to travel to Island B. Island A knows all about bridges and knows how to build them and all the engineering necessary, but Island B knows nothing of bridges or how to build them. Despite B not knowing about bridges, the bridge you build from A would still connect to their island and still exist physically where previously it didn't. It is not required for Island B to have built a bridge, say 50% of the way, for you to connect your bridge to for it to work. But why do the GPS coordinates not change if you are physically somewhere else? Well, because the box acts as an anchor, a fixed point in space-time. It is quantum entangled to the box that the pilot originally entered. And from a TV perspective, the GPS coordinates being the same is a way to illustrate this to the viewers. With all that said, in regards to the drug, I think if the drug was to wear off while you're in the corridor, you would wake up in whatever reality most aligned with what was on your mind at the time. An example of this is in episode 1, when Jason 2 drugged Jason 1 and put him in the box. He kind of seeded his mind with an idea before he closed the door, which, after finding out how you navigate the corridor, this most likely directed Jason 1 to the reality that he ended up in. Because I don't think Jason 1 traveled the corridor during his original trip, because he seemed surprised when both him and Amanda found themselves in it on their next trip. So, what happens next in the show? Well, it's no secret that along with being a fun sci-fi thriller, the show is exploring deeper narratives dealing with choice, regret, the nature of reality, how our decisions affect us and other people around us. But the urge to change things is where our characters differ, at least for now. I think the show is going to investigate the concept of life, death, and a quantum immortality with Max and Layton's grandfather, and the ethics around using a discovery like the box to essentially play God. Right now, Jason 1 is focused on getting back to his reality. He's content with his life, the one that he built with Daniela, and he's not really interested in what some might call a subjectively better life that could lay behind any of the given doors. But this may change, because although money, power, notoriety, these things may not be enough to sway him, finding a world where Max is alive and healthy may. And this is worth noting because in the last episode we finally get a glimpse of the pain that Charlie and Daniela are still going through from the loss of Max. And we get a couple scenes in this episode that are showing that kind of pain. Daniela goes through 2 of them in private, one while she's sitting by the window and kind of just thinking about it, and another when she goes by and touches Max's urn and has another personal moment of reflection. And then later on, obviously the scene by the tree with Charlie, and that's where we find out the reason for those moments we saw earlier is because it was Max's birthday. And again, it's worth noting that the shape of the urn is representative of a higher dimension. Whether they do something with it or not, I don't know, but it's just something I wanted to point out. Now, this brings me to Jason 2, because Jason 2 is all about big gestures and brash decisions. He quits his job in the way that he did, buys Charlie a car without saying anything, tells Danielle just to quit her job, money's good, go back to your passion of painting. And he doesn't just show Light in the box to get him to invest. He brings him in and shows him his grandfather, another big gesture. And again, they put both deceased characters on full display in this episode. So it wouldn't be out of character for Jason 2 to reunite Daniela and Charlie with Max, the most grand gesture of them all, because like he said when he left the school, I can do whatever I want. Let's talk about the Laytons because they're very interesting characters. Despite their obvious differences as far as where they ended up career-wise, they aren't much different in their overall thought process that there's nothing left for them in their respective realities. And this makes them a little bit dangerous. Too dangerous, in my opinion, to give them the keys to the multiverse. And despite the fact that in episode 1, he talks about all the benefits that the box could bring to humanity in this reality, which all sounds great, but we also see the shady side of him and we know what he's capable of after seeing him in episode 1. And of course his counterpart seems a little more blasé in the beginning of episode 4, but by the end of episode 4 we see that same self-serving fire in his eyes that could potentially be dangerous. And that will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And as usual, we really want to know what you think about it, about episode 4, about Dark Matter as a whole, or just where the rest of the season you think is going to take us. Drop a comment under this YouTube video or find us on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook. If you have a social, we have it and we're active on it. And while you're there, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to let me and Rob, and more importantly, the algorithm know that we're on the right track. So until next week, as usual, stay sleuthy.